So this week we're talking about a world that works for everyone. Last week we discussed all are one, and we looked at that inner knowing that we're all connected. In that sense of social distancing that is currently our norm, we can still be connected. And we're grateful for technologies like Zoom and Facebook Live in order to stay connected. But today I want to explore a world that works for everyone by starting with a world that works for you. So I have a question for you. What's the one choice that you might make today so that you know that all that means anything is that while you live, you live. So today is Palm Sunday, and for Christians across the world, it's a celebration of basically for the ministry of Jesus, that climax of the ministry. It's a sacred time for all religions actually throughout the world, and it has been for thousands of years, even before Jesus. But here in the Western world, we use this period right before Easter, this Holy Week, this time of moving up into that time, to really look at the perspective of Jesus' life as reported in the Bible. Now, one thing we know about the Bible is it is not history. It was written mostly by Middle Easterners who didn't even live at the time of Christ. Now, Paul and John, who lived at the time of Christ, do provide information within the Bible, but we look at the Bible not as fact, but as fables and symbols designed to have people recognize spiritual ideas. The Middle Easterners have this saying that says, maybe it happened, maybe it didn't, but the story is what counts. Not the facts, not the fables, it's the story. In religious science, we view the Bible metaphysically or metaphorically, and the story is one that we believe is the evolution of consciousness. A story in which you and I, indeed actually everybody on the planet, are the main characters, and all the other characters are aspects of ourselves. So today I'd like to concentrate on the events of Palm Sunday and the ones that led up to Palm Sunday and their relationship to our lives. And in case you don't remember the stories, it really started when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead in Bethany, which is only a couple miles from Jerusalem. The story itself is very powerful for us right now, and I'd like to relate it as John related it in the Bible. Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, who was the sister of the dead man, "by this time there's a bad odor. He's been in there for 4 days." And then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. And as they were doing that, Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I say this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." And when he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." And the dead man came out. His hands and feet were wrapped in strips of linen, and a cloth was over his face. And Jesus said to the people, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." I'd like us to look at that story for a moment, for what it has to say to us. Lazarus had been entombed for 4 days. And most of us here have been in stay-at-home mode for almost 14 days. There's shelter in place. What's happening is, as we're in this tomb, by now most of us have probably figured out that we can't hide behind the busyness of work or the busyness of things we have to do or places we have to run and go. Martha was afraid of a bad odor. But perhaps the truth is that there's a bad odor for us because we have something entombed that it's now time to face. We have to face these things for ourselves that perhaps we have set aside, perhaps we have let die. This time of being at home is our opportunity to raise up whatever the Lazarus within us might be. I'm curious what it is within you that perhaps you've let die or perhaps you've ignored. And maybe it's possible that you let it die or you ignored it because you didn't think you were good enough, you didn't think you were smart enough, you didn't have enough money. Whatever the reason, now's the time to face your Lazarus. What in your life have you let die or not dealt with that is not really the truth? It's just a story. What is in your tomb that you want to roll away that stone from and allow the light of new thinking, of new beliefs to shine upon it? What do you want to resurrect right now? And allow that grave clothes to be stripped from it. What is it wrapped in that you want to unwrap it from so that you can let it be? Imagine if we each decided to bring forth the best of ourselves and believe in all that we could be. Imagine if we rolled away the stone from the things that we were hiding, took off the grave clothes, and let them be. And while you're pondering that, let me just tell you that there is the rest of the story. Whenever Jesus had done this with Lazarus, he was smart enough to know that the Pharisees weren't going to like it. And so he actually left for a while. He played it cool. He withdrew from that town and went to the town of Ephraim. And he actually stayed there until 6 days before Passover. And then he returned and went to the home of Martha and Lazarus, who created a huge feast for him. But in the meantime, the Pharisees had become very afraid of Jesus' growing popularity. They were threatened by his position within the people. And if the people no longer respected their authority, what they believed was that their power in the nation of Israel would no longer retain its autonomy. So the chief priests and the Pharisees, suspecting that Jesus might come for the Passover, put out the word to let them know if he showed up, to let them know. And there was this anticipation of, will he come? Will we have an opportunity to do something about it? And Jesus came. He rode into town on a donkey. Everyone was cheering. And at the same time that he was riding into one end of town on a donkey, Pontius Pilate and his large group of soldiers on these huge horses were riding into the same town from the other direction, in force to deal with Jesus. The crowds who had flocked into Jerusalem for the Passover heard that Jesus was coming, and the story about Palm Sunday is that they all came and they laid palms at the feet of the donkey as he was riding into town. And he fulfilled a prophecy that they had heard of. Do not be afraid. See, your king is coming, mounted on the colt of a donkey. And the Pharisees said, look at this. There's nothing we can do. Look, the whole world is running to Jesus. But Jesus knew exactly what he was going into. He came from a position of power, knowing the power within him and the deep knowing of strength, while Pontius Pilate and his group were coming from a position of force, trying to force something to happen. Now, you might remember that a donkey is an animal that we call a burden of beast. He's hardworking, he's got willpower, dedication towards getting things where they need to be. And yes, the donkey's a little bit stubborn. But what's true about a donkey is that we use them when we're climbing in the high mountains because they are sure-footed. They know exactly how they're going and where they're going. They are sure-footed. So this story is not about the palms that were laid at the feet of Jesus. The story is really about genuine power versus force, about strength and courage versus misconception and egos, about devotion versus appearances. Because the Pharisees were literalists. They were all about appearances, all about rigid order and the status quo. Metaphysically, we might say that they represent our slavish devotion to that race mind, that thought of all the people that are outside of ourselves. But for them, it truly was about power and about appearances. Apparently, the Pharisees had never heard or didn't agree with the words of our founding father, Ernest Holmes, who said this, and this is the extended quote that you heard part of in the meditation. Man does not exist for the purpose of making an impression upon his environment. He does not exist to express himself in and through his environment. There is a great difference. Man does not exist to leave a lasting impression upon his environment, not at all. It is not necessary that we leave any impression. It is not necessary, if we should pass on tonight, that anyone should remember that we had ever lived. All that means anything is that while we live, and wherever we go from here, we shall keep on living. These are the words that Jesus lived by. He knew his fate. He wasn't naive. He also knew that that mob that was placing palms at his feet would be the same mob that was crying for him to be crucified. So I'm curious, in this stay-at-home time, is there something you're trying to force in your life? Or are you tapping in to that genuine power of the divine presence that is right within you? Because our story that we tell ourselves during this stay at home or any time in our life can be the story of heaven or hell. I know that I've told this story before, but I think it bears repeating right now. There was the story of the banquets. The banquet in heaven and the banquet in hell. And both banquet tables were filled with all the possible foods you could imagine. And if you opened the door to hell, all you heard was noise and complaining and criticism, because what happened was the people's hands could not bend, and they had these long forks, and the people in hell couldn't figure out how to feed themselves. So there's all these foods with their hands tied to these forks, and they can't eat. They're starving with a banquet right before them. Now, when you open the door to heaven, what you see is laughter and joy. Because what happened was the people were feeding those across the table from them with the long forks. And everyone is abundantly enjoying this feast. So we can create our heaven and hell. Jesus knew through the sequence of things that happened that there was a power within him, and that he could live from that power inside of him, and that he could do anything regardless of what the opposition was. He rode in on that sure-footed donkey, on that true fitting symbol of leadership. Remember, the donkey doesn't prance. It doesn't strut like those huge horses that the soldiers were riding in on. But it does know what it's doing and where it's going. Jesus was in full command. The power that each of us has to take command of our lives is huge. Jesus knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly where he was going. He wasn't a lamb being led to slaughter. He moved through the events of the week in full command of himself. We can do that. We can move through the events of our days, through our weeks, in this stay-at-home time, in full command of ourselves. We can get caught up in the negative thinking and allow that to run our day, or we can live a day where more than half the day we're living in a space of what we really want to be doing, of what we want to be thinking, of the things that bring joy into our lives. We can find ways to untune those things that we let die. During this Palm Sunday, John reports that Jesus said, "Walk while you have the light, or the dark will overtake you." He who walks in the dark does not know where he is going. While you still have the light, believe in the light. He wasn't talking to the ignorant people. He was talking to his disciples, those that he loved, those that he knew were following him. And he said during that week, "Great works that I do, even greater shall you do." He was talking to people like us. The story behind that is for us to embrace who we are, for us to know where we're going and what we're doing. Jesus taught that God is already an expression in us, that we're already making it. He didn't come to die for our sins. He came to show us the way. So roll away the stone of your entombed greatness while you have the light. Spend some time this week looking at what you have let die that needs to be resurrected. Something that you need to nourish, that you need to know absolutely it's possible. That you're good enough, you have whatever you need to make that dream come true. Now is the time for us to have a great congruence between what we say we believe and how we actually live. And we do that by knowing where we're going, by knowing that we want to shine light on those things that have left in the tomb, and we want to unwrap the grave clothes that we put around them and let them show up in our world. So, this week, create a message that shows everyone by example that genuine power is far superior to force. That strength and courage are superior to misconception and egos and doing it my way. at the expense of everyone else. That devotion is superior to appearances. That knowing how to handle situations is superior to pretending to know how to handle situations. You've got it in you. The way that we create a world that works for everybody is to set the example that we absolutely know that genuine power overcomes force always. So Holmes tells us, well, let me start back. Jesus said, "Before they call, I will answer. And while they are speaking, I will hear." Ernest Holmes provides a look at those words, and he says this: "The shifting of a burden is important for when we feel isolated, alone, and struggling against tremendous odds, when we are not equal to the task before us. We shift the burden to know that before they call, I will answer. The divine is listening. All we have to do is speak." He goes on to say that if we knew the burden was lifted, love, power, and speed come to our hands and feet, and joy floods the imagination with anticipation. Love, power, and speed come to our hands and feet, and joy floods the imagination with anticipation. So how do you shift your burden this week? Imagine a world in which the things that you've set aside as not doable, you have time to do them. Roll away the stones. Allow yourself to unwrap whatever it is you set aside to die. And if you're stuck in the thinking of things that you don't want, remember to take the 3 breaths. I'm going to remind you of this every week for a while. Breath 1 is, breathe in deeply. There is only one life. Let that settle. Breathe in again. That life is God. And breathe in a 3rd time. That life is my life now. So I have 2 challenges for you this week. One is to remember that all that means anything is that while you live, you live. So roll away the stone of your tomb, resurrect what it is you let die, and know that you can brush off the grave clothes and let it live like Lazarus. And the second one is to continue to pray each day, to take 10 minutes out of your day and pray that this virus is reducing by 10%. Because when 2 or more of us are praying, even before we speak, God hears us. But while we're speaking, the divine is listening. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so glad that you were able to be here. And we are in a place of time offering, and I want to remind you that our expenses continue while we are moving through this Facebook Live phase. We have this saying that from the love of pure spirit within me, I bless the gift. I'm blessing the gifts that have come to me this week via the mail, and you can go out to our website and find that. And our offertory blessing is this. From the love of pure spirit within me, I bless this gift. I send it forth to heal, bless, and prosper. It does good work in the world and returns to me, multiplied abundantly. So I invite you to find a way to help donate. There's a donate button right here on the website, which is at the CSL Southeast spelled out, LA.org. If you go out and look for Center for Spiritual Living Southeast Louisiana, it will actually bring you to our website. And if you go to the donate page, you can donate either as a guest on PayPal, as a regular PayPal person, or there's a address where you can mail in a check. So we're knowing that that's going to happen and that you will be blessed by those gifts that you're sending. Thank you so much for that. And I want to let you know that at 11:30 we have a special session where you can come. This is our form of community time together. It's on a conference call. This is also on our Facebook page. If you don't have the number, you could find it there. 515-604-9000. And there is a participation code that you need. And so when you dial in, it'll just ask you for the participation code. You put it in with the pound sign after it, and you can join our discussion. We've been having some great discussions, so I'm hoping that you'll have time to do that. So until we meet again, may you be wrapped in the arms of loving kindness, and may you go roll away that stone and resurrect whatever it is that you've let die, that's a dream, and let it come true. Thank you very much. See you soon.